In this segment, what we're going to try to do is talk about forgiveness. We're actually going to talk about forgiveness in several sections because that is a big issue with couples. But the first segment here is really aimed at kind of telling you what we know about forgiveness. And then after we've done that, we'll talk about how do we help couples deal with issues that they have unforgiveness about. So that's our mission over the course of several meetings with me, and so let's kind of get started. The first, I think, kind of basic idea in terms of forgiveness is that when people experience an offense or an injustice, they kind of start their mental computer running, and they create what I call an injustice gap. So the injustice gap is like the difference between we would like to see this issue resolved and the way that it is right now. So big gaps are very hard to deal with. Small gaps, really easy to deal with. So we keep our kind of mental computer running and adjusting to things that happen in the course of just interacting about this offense. So, for example, if a person's partner has forgotten an important date, for example, and the partner who feels offended says, "Why did you do this?" And the person says, "It's no big deal." Well, the injustice gap that partner had because they had been forgotten now is bigger. But if, when confronted, the partner goes, "Oh, I feel so terrible about this. How can I make up for this? What can I do to make up for this?" Then that reduces the size of the injustice gap and makes it easier to deal with. So this way that couples interact really figures into how easy it is for a person to forgive or not to forgive. So that injustice gap is really key because it reflects kind of the reality of the relationship and what's going on. So it turns out that there are lots of ways to deal with injustices and offenses that we experience, and forgiveness is really only one of those ways. It's a very important way, but it's only one of many biblically consistent ways to deal with offenses. Now, of course, we have things that are not biblically consistent, such as we can get revenge against the other person or hurt them back or get even. But there are a lot of ways, such as turning things over to God. I've been offended. I go, "Lord, this is not my problem. This is something you need to deal with." Or even, we find in scriptures people appealing to divine justice. "Lord, vindicate this." And so hopefully we don't do that with our spouse, but maybe other people who have hurt our spouse or hurt us, we might pray that God would intervene and kind of bring about a divine justice. Forbearance is another way that people can deal with these injustice gaps. People can say, "Just for the good of the group or the good of the relationship, I'm not going to respond." And that's a perfectly legitimate way. Paul talks about forgiving them and forbearing. And so forbearing, that's a good way. We can accept and that bad stuff happens. I'm just going to accept this. I'm going to move on with life. So we have lots of different ways besides forgiving that we can deal with injustices. But forgiving is another one of those ways. So we actually believe there are two types of forgiveness. One is to make a decision about how I intend to act toward this person who offended me in the future. I'm going to not get even with them. I'm going to treat them as a valuable and valued person. I'm not going to put them down. It's a decision about my intentions to act in a honorable way toward them. Notice this is not behavior, because this could be someone who offended me, at work, and they get hit by a car tonight, and I never get to carry out my intentions. I've still forgiven them. On the other hand, I can make a sincere decision to forgive people and feel bitter and resentful and angry and hostile and sometimes even hateful toward people. And I still hold on to that decision. So that fact that I have this emotion means that I am going to expect that there's a second type of forgiveness. We call this emotional forgiveness. So this is replacing those negative, unforgiving emotions with positive emotions like understanding and empathy for the person, or sympathy or compassion or love for the person. Now, I can use all of those ways at the same time to deal with an offense against me. I'm going to try to accept this, and maybe that helps me. I'm going to forbear. I'm not going to answer in a negative, hostile way. And I'm going to try to make a decision to forgive, and also to calm myself by replacing the hurt feelings with love. So a lot of good ways to deal with forgiveness. And forgiveness, we can see, depends on our trust of the other person. And that suggests that in a relationship where you've got two people that may each have hurt the other person, trustworthiness is very important to how people deal with these problems. So if a person is not going to be trustworthy, then they're very hard to forgive. We can forgive them, but they're very hard to forgive. That trustworthiness, though, is going to come back, and it's going to really speak directly to whether we reconcile with a person. So because trust is so important, and trustworthiness, I have kind of thought of a list of things that people might do to promote more trust. So one of the things that people can do is listen and reflect back empathically that you've heard the partner. So as a counselor, we can stimulate the couples listening and reflecting back. Another thing is to encourage people to be humble. Humility in a Christian framework is about being oriented toward the other. Humility is like a signal that says, I'm for you. And so encouraging humility. Another thing is to attempt to resolve conflicts quickly instead of letting them linger on. So often we will not deal with forgiveness really until we've dealt with the conflicts and better communication. Yet another thing is to, if a person hurts the partner, then try to confess in a quick manner and also in an effective manner. And later when we talk about reconciliation, I will take you through a way of confessing in a more effective manner than just blurting out I did wrong. We can try to make amends. We can try to be trustworthy. We can just be focused on understanding the other person. This valuing of the other person is going to really help people be more trusting. We can seek times of intimacy. We can work to not let our passion die, because all of that emotional connection that we have enhances our trust also. So third parties can get in the middle of forgiveness. There is a colleague of mine at Virginia Commonwealth University named Jeff Green. He wrote a paper about what he calls the mother-in-law effect. And this is like, you hurt my baby. And, the person gets involved in the marriage, and this can cause kind of more complicated dynamics. Children also can offend us, can hurt us, can disappoint us. And depending on the age of the child and the development of the child's mental capacities, they might or might not be able to forgive. But we can still help them to kind of get ready to forgive when they do grow into the maturity to be able to forgive, by helping them practice things like apologize to your brother, say you're sorry, tell him you forgive him. What we're doing is what developmental psychologists call scaffolding. We're making a kind of a structure that they can grow into and internally change later. Now, one other main finding, and then we'll end this session. We did a meta-analysis back in 2013, which was published in 2014. So meta-analysis looks at all of the research that exists, and it tries to see what we learn from all of the research we could find on how people forgive. And we found some very interesting things from that. The champion of that research, the first author of that, was Nathaniel Wade at Iowa State University. But what we found, first of all, is that really forgiveness is all about helping people spend time forgiving. There is a certain amount of forgiveness you get from spending an hour thinking conscientiously about forgiving. We don't get very much impact from thinking about forgiveness for 10 minutes. We get some impact for thinking about it for an hour, twice as much for thinking about it for 2 hours, 4 times as much for 4 hours. You can see that there is a relationship, that it's really all about time. There's a really practical implication of that. If you work with a couple for 2 hours on teaching them how to forgive, you're going to have a certain amount of forgiveness, but it's not going to be that much that they experience. And that means you need to think about aiming them toward working on forgiveness outside of the relationship in counseling. So these are kind of a number of things that we know about forgiveness. As we move through this, I'm going to talk more practically about how does the counselor do this. Thank you.